Hey everybody, this is Joe Joseph, and this is the Daily Sheeple.com's Daily News Brief. I want to start today off, or actually make the focus of today's Daily News Brief about education. But before I do, I want to give a special shout out to Dylan out in California. Just want to give a shout out to you and say keep on keeping on with the Joe Joseph University as, you might learn a thing or two as we go along here, especially today. Now, of course, President Trump has most of his appointees have been confirmed in the Senate. One of them, very controversial, and she shouldn't be. And I'll tell you why. And if there's one thing that I agree with here, since we're not getting rid of the Department of Education, on the federal level, was the appointment of Betsy DeVos as the education secretary. I thought that was out of all of his picks, that was probably the best one I agree with. And I want to bring up why. And it may ruffle some feathers, but to those listening here today and watching here today, I can tell you that a lot of the things I'm going to talk about today, I've learned personally through life experience, as I'm sure much of you have, but I'm also going to throw some statistics in there to make the case. And also use some congressional testimony and congressional records to also back up why I think that she's going in the right direction. But MRT.com has a great piece that says Betsy DeVos may be the least of public education's problems. It says newly confirmed Education Secretary Betsy DeVos may just be the most reviled woman in America today. Protesters recently blocked her from walking in through the front door of Washington, D.C. school. She's been accused of being too rich and privileged to comprehend public education and mocked for being concerned about the threat of grizzly bears on school grounds. Let me stop there for a second. Rich and privileged to comprehend public education. No, you don't. Rich and privilege has nothing to do with comprehending the fact that the public education system has effectively dumbed down our society significantly in the last 60 years. It's been a very steady decline as far as how the United States ranks against other countries. I'll get into that in a minute. And she made some comments during a speech in Texas in 2015 that I thought very accurately reflect the problem with the public education system. And this is what she said. She said, quote, "It's a battle of industrial age versus digital age. It's the Model T versus Tesla. It's old factory models versus the new internet model. It's the Luddites versus the future. We are the beneficiaries of startups, ventures, and innovations in every other area of life, but we don't have that in education because it's a closed system, a closed industry, and a closed market. It's a monopoly, a dead end. As long as education remains a closed system, we'll never see the educational equivalents of Google, Facebook, Amazon, PayPal, Wikipedia, or Uber. We won't see any real innovation that benefits more than a handful of students." She's spot on there, and I'll tell you why. The public education system as we know it was started up as a need to get people assimilated to a 9-to-5 factory manufacturing type environment. It was breeding drones or workers and using like the Pavlov's dogs concept. Bell rings, go here. Bell rings, go here. Follow the schedule. Don't be late. Don't do this. Get everybody on set schedules and routines. In an effective effort to breed generations of people that just do what they're told when they're told to do it. When the bell rings, you go here, you punch in, you punch out. And it was effective for that time period, but it's not effective anymore. Not to mention the fact that that's all good if you're trying to, just like I said, put people through. But if you're actually trying to educate people, then it's naive to use a system that cookie cutters education, because human beings aren't cookie cutter. We're not born cookie cutter. We're not all chocolate chip cookies. We may all be ice cream, but we're all different flavors. And some people are more proficient in mathematics. Some people are more proficient, with language. Some people are artists. There's so many different flavors to humanity. So why would you force people to have to go through and sit through things that they just doesn't agree with them? Now, I know life is not so, you can't really pick and choose things like that in life. And of course you get blindsided and they say, well, a well-rounded education is what you need. No, not exactly. A well-rounded education comes from life experience. It comes from that. That's when you gather, your wisdom. That is a well-rounded education. That's what makes it well-rounded. But really, think about what the public education has done, the system has done to now generations of Americans. It has effectively snuffed out or drastically reduced our Edisons, our Teslas, our brilliant minds to go ahead and see their potential, their full potential, because they're wasting their time and becoming disenchanted with learning because they have to sit through English, if it's a math guy, math whiz. He said, I had a coworker that had a son that was unbelievable. When I say unbelievably brilliant in math, I cannot explain to you in words this child's capability in the field of mathematics. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, this is a kid that should be locked in a room and fed math until he loves it. Loves math. Anything math, he'll spend hours on doing it, problems. He was doing calculus, advanced calculus, and he was 9 years old. So this is the kind of mind that I'm talking about. But mom and dad, being assimilated, felt the need to force him to go through an education system that cookie cuttered, and as a result, he did poorly and was put on medication. And why? This is the problem. You want to know why they have to medicate all these children and why there's such behavioral issues and why all this stuff happens? It's not just because of the food we eat. It's not just because of, perhaps vaccinations and some of the side effects that come from the thimerosal and other adjuvants they may cut it with. It's not a one thing. It's a dynamic thing, but one thing is for sure. The way that we educate our children actually is counterproductive to overall advancement. In education, you do not want to disenchant children from learning. But if you remember when we went to high school, I went to high school, I didn't give a crap. I could have probably done much better if I focused on the things that I was naturally wired for and that I was interested in, because boy, would that drive be there, that drive to succeed, that drive to go and thirst to go farther and farther, because it's what I enjoy to learn. I was a mechanical, electronics. I love that kind of stuff. But had to force myself through English, and I love history, but not that kind of history. Social studies, I didn't like that. Hated science. Hated science and math. Ugh. Had to trudge through that. It wasn't until Kev Baker over at the Kev Baker Show. He got me into science. And boy, that was great. But I'll tell you what. Growing up, I didn't want anything to do with it. I loved music. Wish I could have pursued that more. Found out, wow, later on in life, I had a natural propensity to it. And, I did do some, but certainly not enough. I could have done without the health class and all that kind of stuff. It was a waste of time. It's a waste of time to me. And if we just took that, now think about this too. We live in an internet age now. Everything that you need to know is available to you most times for free on the internet. Why on earth would we continue to send our children to these institutions of learning when everything's available at home? When everything's available, even if you have to send them to daycare or whatever, you know? And that's really what, let's be honest, that's what public education's all about at this point, is daycare. It is what raises your children now, especially if you have two working parents. So that's another reason why things are screwed up. You have a teacher that is really not able to focus on teaching because he or she is so worried about the No Child Left Behind crap and all the standardized testing that has to go on to justify federal funding, which is absolutely asinine. They spend more time testing in a classroom than they actually do learning, which is another bone of contention. But, you know, they have to raise your children too. They have to deal with behavioral issues that didn't used to exist. Because society, you know, this has been a cascading failure. And where education starts to fail, it starts to bleed over into other areas of our society. And next thing you know, society's, you know, the morals, the virtues, the values, they all go down the toilet. It's unbelievable. So yeah, we have to evolve. She's talking about giving people access if they don't want to go to the public school because the public school is not performing. Perhaps the public school teaches things that are counter to your values or virtues, to your morals, to your spiritual or religious stance and beliefs. So she says, hey, let's give you an option. Let's give you multiple options. Let's make it so you can go to a charter school, so you can get vouchers and go to the school that you want to go to or send your kids to. You know? Why does it have to be so hard to homeschool? Why do you have to jump? Why do you have to ask the government for permission to do anything when it comes to your children? Think about that for a second. And as these government officials, both state, city, federal, it doesn't matter, they sit high on their pedestal thinking that their poo doesn't stink. The OECD conducts testing. It's called the PISA test. And the PISA test is basically 70 countries that participate in it. It's a test that goes across the board, a standardized test, if you will, that goes across the board and tests students from 70 countries and ranks the countries, you know, 1 being the best and 70 being the worst. The test actually encompasses math, reading, and science. Just those 3 things. Now, before I tell you where the U.S. ranks, I want to tell you when the federal government took over public education in 1953 with the establishment of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the United States was by far and away number 1 when it came to math, reading, and science. Now, let's go to 2015, if we can. And where does the U.S. rank? Well, in math, we can't even make halfway up the list. We're 40th out of 70 countries. The number 1 country in the world, by the way, is Singapore. The number 70 is the Dominican Republic. Okay? We rank 40th out of 70 countries in math. We were first in 1953. We are now 40th. In reading, we rank 24th out of 70 countries. The first being Singapore. The 70th being Lebanon. And in science, my friends, we rank 25th in the world out of 70 countries, the first being Singapore, the 70th being Dominican Republic. Now, for all the money that we pump into the public education system, and we don't have a choice in this, we have seen systematic failure of the public education system because look at it's gone down, 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 down. So what does that mean? It means that it doesn't work and that you need radical change in order to make that happen, to make improvements happen. Now, in the United States, she's absolutely right. It's a monopoly. You have the National Education Association that has thousands upon thousands of teachers that belong to this union that have incredible power, incredible lobbying presence in Washington, and will push this communist type education system on us. And remember, again, it's communist at its core. It's one of the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And they're going to push it, and they're going to push it to keep it going, because as long as they can do that, you have a controlled population. Again, 25th, 24th, and 40th. Disgusting. You know, and in every other aspect of our life, if we know there's a product or a service that's going to deliver horrible results, are we going to buy or purchase that service or product? No. So if we can make the choice for ice cream, right? And it's so unimportant, you know, that maybe, I don't like Breyers. I like Ben and Jerry's. So why do I have to be forced to eat Breyers if I don't like it? It doesn't make any sense. And as long as we continue to go down that course, we are screwed. And they knew this a long time ago, my friends, because Congressman B. Carroll Reese actually investigated the endowments, you know, your tax-exempt organizations. And what he found, and what his independent investigator, Norman Dodd, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can check out, just search Joe Joseph, and you will find Norman Dodd. An interview, one of the last interviews he did before he passed away with G. Edward Griffin on my YouTube channel. And just watch that interview. I'm telling you, folks, it will blow your mind if you don't understand how long there's been an agenda to hijack the education system to dumb down the American public. It's well over 100 years old. And B. Carroll Reese exposed it as he was the chairman of the House Special Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations. And so what these were, you know, the Guggenheim Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation. They're philanthropic foundations that had an agenda and became a principal source of communist influence and infiltration and subversion in the United States. That's what it was, and that's what it still is today. You know, so this is what they found. They found that 50 foundations were named as supporters of studies or programs contributing to communist purposes in the United States. And you can call it what you will. Communism, you can call it, the advancement of globalism, but that's what it is. It's this idea and concept that everybody has to do and have the same thing all the time, like we're robots, like we're drones. That's the way they want to treat us. And it's so important to understand, because if you want to know why we are stuck in this continual decline, a lot of it has to do with how we're rearing the next generation. And it's not good. I'm going to close with this, and this is very important, a very important quote in history that no one ever hears. And this has to do with public education. Chester M. Pierce. Now, he is a chairman emeritus, I think, of one of the departments at Harvard. But at the time, he was a professor of education and psychiatry at the Faculty of Medicine at Harvard University. And in 1972, April of 1972, he was the keynote speaker at a function for the Association for Childhood Education International. And this is what he said in 1972, quote, "Every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is insane because he comes to school with certain allegiances towards our founding fathers, towards his parents, towards a belief in a supernatural being. It's up to you, teachers, to make all these sick children well by creating the international child of the future." What is that international child of the future, my friends? A controllable drone. That's what they want. That's what they want. And we have to fight this, folks. We have to fight this. Betsy DeVos is not a concern. If anything, it's one of the decisions I think that Trump hit the nail on the head on. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's news brief, and I'll have one again for you tomorrow. Check out our newsletter and subscribe to it at thedailysheeple.com, and subscribe to this YouTube channel, and have a great day. Take care.